There you are. Good morning. How you doing? You all right? It's Friday morning, of course. It's the 21st of June, 2019, and the sun is breaking through there. The old clouds here in Salford in Greater Manchester. Are you in fine fettle this morning? You are. I'm in good form myself. A little bit tired this morning, but otherwise I'm fine. Really interesting things. I want to say hi to Phil Restino in Florida. Phil, if you're watching this, I did get your email this morning about what was going on in DC overnight, and it's very interesting indeed. We'll have a little chat about that in a minute. Of course, this aborted airstrike on Iran that Donald Trump's aides, including of course John Bolton, National Security Advisor, and others, Gina Haspel, of course, desperately keen for the United States to launch limited airstrikes at targets in Iran in retaliation for the downing of this drone that Iran says was in Iranian airspace. This spy drone, this $220 million drone thing. We'll have a chat about that in a minute. And we'll go through the papers this morning. Why not? Why not indeed? Right. So, a few comments coming in there. Good morning, Danny. Good morning, Julie Johnson. You were first in, Julie, and Philip and Alex and Mo Lester and Twisted Hippie and Julie Walters. Four Jam Lions. Findlay. Findlay is in Hamburg. How you doing, Findlay? Nice to chat with you this morning. Hi to Marty, to Sean Mack, and to Lord Bransty, to Dean Thornby, to Samantha Jordan, to Jesus Jones, Ghost Gaming, Chris Brown, Josh Ratcliffe, John Sheridan. How you doing, John? Thanks, John. Thanks for the kind words there, my friend. Whimsical Wolf as well. How you doing? Martin Coombs, Patrick Vidine, Charles Richard. How you doing, Charles? Thank God Trump called it off, says Charles Richard there. Bolton, yeah. Bolton is a madman. Hi to John Parsons as well, who says, give a shout to my son Sean Richie. He finished his GCSE and he's going to his prom today. Normalcy in a mad world. That's a lovely thing, John. He's off to his prom. In Ireland we say Debs, short for debutante ball, presumably. I went to a few Debs in my time, my own one, and I went to some friends' Debs. I accompanied some girlfriends, friends who were girls, to their Debs. I wonder what the proms and debutante balls are going to look like in the next few years. Will most of the lads be wearing skirts and dresses? Will they? Will they? Will we have gender-neutral proms? Will we? Gender-neutral proms, why not? And buildings outfitted specially with gender-neutral bathrooms, so the little snowflakes can maybe bring two outfits. I'm not quite sure until I get to the venue, until I see the decor. I'm not sure if I'm going as a male or a female or an effing unicorn. I'm not sure. Hi to Tony Maudsley. How you doing, Tony? Who's in Chorley? That's not too far away, Tony. And to Mr. Sin. Did you lecture me about saying Mr. Shin? I think you did. I had a few sherbets last night, and before I went to bed I had a look at Twitter. So it's Mr. Sin, of course, who's Irish. How you doing, pal? Unicorns, yeah. Imagine what proms will look like in the near future if this rather silly, rather scary agenda proceeds. Marvellous, huh? Yeah. Kevin Hansen says, Richie, open the phone lines. Let us hear from your listeners. No. This show is about me and my opinions. And I'm the only one who matters, Kevin. In the future, I'll be opening the phone lines. It's not the right time to do it between 5 and 7 UK time. You're not likely, however many people you've got listening, to generate an enormous amount of calls because of the time. The previous time span for the show, the previous time slot for the show when it went out between 7 and 9 p.m. was much better for phone calls. I look into it. Yeah, okay. I love hearing from listeners. Remember, I've been doing this gig one way or another for many years, and I much prefer listening to my listeners' opinions than I do bringing you audio and sound bites and bits and pieces from around the world. I'd much rather hear from the listeners. And when we did it before, we had people calling in from all around the world. And it was always different. And I like that. So, yeah, of course, we'll do that in the future. Right. These two jokers. Look at that. I told you. Look, what did I tell you? I didn't get 5 minutes without a mistake. That's John Bolton there. And Donald Trump, of course. The walrus. And before we look at the front pages of the newspapers, let's have a brief chat about what apparently went on last night. This aborted strike on Iran, which one or two of you are saying there on the messaging thing, on the super chat. You're saying it's a good thing, thank God it didn't happen. Well, I second that, to be honest. So here's a story on the BBC. US-Iran, Trump pulls back after approving military strikes. So these would have been retaliatory strikes against Iran yesterday. According to the New York Times, strikes were planned against a handful of targets. You can read it there. The operation was allegedly underway. Ships were in place apparently, and birds were in the sky. Planes were flying when Trump stood down the order, stood the military down. White House, as of 22 minutes to 10 UK time this morning, hasn't yet commented on it. The BBC says this is after this drone was shot down, which we talked about a few minutes ago. Tehran says that the unmanned drone did enter Iranian airspace. The US maintains, or has maintained, it hasn't said anything after the aborted strike, but up until yesterday it maintained it was in international waters. It's provocative anyway, regardless of whether it was a couple of miles into Iranian airspace or outside it. It is provocative. It is bullying. It is the scumbag behaviour of the Zionist puppet United States military and its puppet-in-chief Donald Trump. It is scumbag, aggressive behaviour. That's what it is. Who could blame the Iranians for shooting down spy drones, either just outside or just inside its international, its own airspace and its international waters? Who could blame it? How much was it going to put up with, like, before it said, well, look, enough's enough now, you know? This is an unmanned drone. Talked about this on yesterday's impromptu radio show. Imagine you've got 1 in 4 American children going to bed hungry. This is true. It's no gag, right? But we've got money. We've got $250,000 to spend on an unmanned drone. And I talked, of course, yesterday about the inflated prices of the hardware. It couldn't cost more than $100,000 to make. With a bit of, what do they use? I know they use certain metals in these things that are probably expensive, fair enough. They use software, which has probably got an intellectual property right on it, which is probably costing a fortune. But how could you justify giving Raytheon $220,000 for a spy drone and you have people going to bed hungry? That's true. What else does the BBC say about this morning? So just before dawn then, these strikes were due to take place, allegedly to minimise the risk to the Iranian military and to any civilians. And the Associated Press quoted a US official as saying the strikes had been recommended by the Pentagon and were among options presented to senior administration officials. And what's very interesting today, hi to Liz McFall. How you doing, Liz? And thank you so much for your super chat donation, Liz. You've made my morning. Thank you very much for that. That's lovely. So what's very interesting about this is the notion that Donald Trump might be getting advice from a Fox News presenter called Tucker Carlson, whom I've mentioned once or twice on the radio show. And this is a little snippet from an RT story that suggests, in fact, it's the Daily Beast suggesting that Tucker Carlson has Trump's ear, because Carlson, who was a one-time supporter of George W. Bush's war of aggression in Iraq, has changed his tune in the last few years. Fox needed to counterbalance all the rabid, warmongering, lunatic presenters that Fox ordinarily has, needed a bit of a faux lefty. And I don't want to sound like I'm bashing Tucker Carlson. Not that he would care. Very successful presenter, wealthy, on big bucks with Fox News. He couldn't care. That's what some nobody in Salford says about him. But he's all right, Tucker, I suppose. You've got to support his stance, his non-interventionist, non-military aggression stance. So the Daily Beast, and it's being published by RT this morning, is suggesting that Trump is actually getting his advice, maybe not man to man, but that Trump is maybe listening to Tucker Carlson. Because I Am the Walrus, John Bolton, of course, and Pompeo and Gina Haspel, these are lunatic Zionist neocons who want to set the Middle East on fire and kill millions of people. Millions of people. That's what they want to do. Okay? Remember the 7 countries, remember post 9/11? Wesley Clark? Don't have to tell you that. That's not new, that's old news. So I'm not going to go on and on and on about this. We know what's going on. We know what the agenda is. And we know who and what is behind it. And it's far deeper and far more sinister than most people can possibly comprehend. It has so many facets to it. Depopulation is one of them. It's undoubted that there is an agenda, there is a plan to plunge the world into a global conflict. Multiple theatres, as I said, multiple countries, and for it to be never ending, for it to go on forever and ever and ever until hundreds and millions, if not billions of people are killed or starved to death. That's what we're looking at. All right. So, yeah. So that's the news, if you believe it, that it was all ready to go. Trump's Zionist neocon nutcase advisors had presented him with the targets in Iran to hit. The ships were there, the planes were in the sky, and Trump said, hang on a second, let's not do it, let's hold off. His supporters, of course, who swear by him, will be absolutely chuffed to bits with this. And will be saying it's evidence that Trump really is this QAnon, that Trump is really doing his best from within his Oval Office bunker to face down and to take on the deep state. It's crap, but that's how they'll sell it today. Let's have a look at the Express front page. Pretty much every newspaper today is covering the story of the Conservative Party leadership election, which has now come down to 2 men, the former Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson and the current Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt. And a number of them are going with the theme that yesterday's result was revenge for Boris Johnson. Because you might remember, Michael Gove, who was one of the final 3 who was eliminated yesterday, infamously stabbed Boris Johnson in the back and threw his own hat into the ring during the last go-round. And the last go-round, of course, gave us Theresa May as the leader of the Conservative Party and ultimately anointed Theresa May as Prime Minister. So at that time, Gove was supporting Boris Johnson, but then stabbed Johnson in the back, ran for the leadership of the Conservative Party himself, and had a big falling out apparently behind the scenes with Boris Johnson. So they are down to 2 now. There will be a couple of television debates between the 2, and next week, I think, or maybe the week after, the membership, the Conservative Party members across the country will get to go to their local, wherever it happens to be, will go to a designated place and will decide whether Johnson or Jeremy Hunt becomes the Prime Minister, effectively. So that's in the Express. Like I said, it's everywhere today, that story. In The Guardian, Johnson versus Hunt, but was the result fixed? Johnson had such a massive lead that it's being alleged that he urged some of his fellow MPs, because until this point, the voting has been exclusively for members of Parliament. So it's being alleged that Johnson's team said to their supporters, their backbenchers, throw a few votes Jeremy Hunt's way to keep Michael Gove out of the final two. That's in The Guardian, and that story is running elsewhere this morning as well. There's the iPaper with the same story. Dirty tricks, Johnson gets revenge on Gove. Right, we'll leave that there. No need to dwell too much on that. What about the Daily Mail today? Well, there you go. Boris gets his revenge. Hunt vows to give Johnson fight of his life after knife edge vote. Johnson got 150 whatever. Hunt got 77 and I think Gove got 75, or it was 75-73. Michael Gove had a face on him like a baby seal. No, I'm not going to do that joke. There are a few snowflakes in my audience. The Daily Mirror, the liar versus the NHS wrecker. Don't often find myself agreeing with the Daily Mirror, but that's what you have left in the Tory leadership race. You've got a liar and an NHS wrecker, but there are a lot more. There are many more things you could use, many more adjectives you could use to describe those two. What about the Star? Jimmy Carr dwarf shame. Sick gag sparks outrage. What could this be about? Jimmy Carr is a stand-up comedian, very successful one, with his own television show on Channel 4, isn't he? Is that 10 out of cats do count? 10? 9 out of 10 cats do count down, is it, or something? I don't know. Shall we look at a story? There it is. Inside the Star, Jimmy Carr faces huge storm over comedian's sick gag about dwarfs. What did he say about dwarfs? Is that the societally accepted way of describing a smaller person? Is dwarf okay, is it? Listen, I don't care what people think or say, and I don't go to Twitter or to society to find out what's okay to say, but most people do. I personally wouldn't use the term dwarf to describe somebody who's small, who's got there are a number of reasons why people don't grow beyond 4 feet or 3 feet 5 or whatever it is. I have no idea, but is it dwarf? Is that what we say? What did he say? He said, let me put my glasses on rather than squint like an Egypt. The controversial Channel 4 star was slammed for saying that dwarfs were abortions which made it during his stand-up comedy tour. Dwarfs are abortions that made it. So, presumably there's a Twitter storm. I don't know. That's what stand-up comedians do, isn't it? They push the boundaries of what is decent and what is in good taste. It's what they do. Usually to a raucous crowd of people who have had a few sherbets in the bar. I wouldn't describe people as dwarves or as midgets. Just refer to them by their name, I suppose. But the Twitterati, perennially offended mob are demanding that he's dealt with. Let's go to the comments again. This is the newspaper review YouTube worst live stream ever. Let's go back. Good morning to Jennifer Garcia. Good morning, Jennifer. Hi, Sean Hinchcliffe. Google is hiding comments all the time. I don't hide them. It's not me. I have no control over that. Jazz says, Richie, have you ever interviewed Gordon Bowden about Finchley Road? Many years ago I did. About 4 or so years ago, I do remember having some guy called Gordon Bowden or Bowden on the show. It'll be on iTunes if you want to listen back to it. It would have been on my old YouTube channel before it was deleted. But there you are. Michael Kelly says, Boris winning is great for the UK. The Scots will love him. Let me scroll back there. Hi to Ketchup Mayo to Mo Lester as well. Mo says, and people think it's Russia that controls Trump. Americans are so not intelligent. A boy called Jared is Donald Trump's handler. And that's all you really have to say about what's going on there in DC. Thanks again, Liz, for that. Hi to Byron Raver. Let me scroll back on down. You see so many come in. Hi to Bex Hill. How you doing, Bex? I'd like to say hello to everybody. To Lance Burkett. Thanks, Lance, for the donation, by the way. The PayPal donation. Thanks, mate. I would have dropped you an email later on. Hi to Aaron Donnelly. And let's go down there. To Dick Scratcher. Mickey Scratcher. Willie Scratcher. Remember those. Did you make those prank phone calls like Bart Simpson when you were younger? Did you? We did it all the time. Rang up the operator and all of that. Right, so let's look at the Sun. So Jimmy Carr made a gag. Nobody is happy about it. I bet you Warwick Davis, who's actually a really interesting guy, Warwick Davis, despite being a dwarf. Warwick Davis made a documentary, didn't he, a few years ago, where he went on holidays with his family, his wife and his children. And he came across as being a really interesting guy. He was really warm and engaging, I thought. Really interesting guy. In fact, I was watching a couple of old episodes of Extras with Ricky Gervais last night, and Warwick was in one of those episodes. It was good fun. The Sun has got a story about Mastermind, a bit of a scandal, where a winning answer turned out to be incorrect, apparently. We couldn't give a shite, could we? So we'll get rid of that. The Telegraph. Boris exacts his revenge as Gove is squeezed out. Yeah, revenge. We saw that earlier on every other bloody paper. And Rupert Murdoch's Times. Dirty battle. For number 10. Also on the front page of the Times, more about the fractious or fractured relationship between the royal brothers, William and Harry, whose wives apparently don't get on very well. Now they've split from a charity that they launched because they don't like each other very much. Lovely. Lovely jubbly. This is in all the newspapers this morning, and it's on all the TV news programmes. You probably won't be surprised. I happened to be watching Sky News last night at around about 8 o'clock when this kicked off. The Chancellor of the Exchequer gives an annual address at Mansion House. And Philip Hammond is the current Chancellor of the Exchequer. As he was approaching the lectern to give his speech, a bunch of Greenpeace eco-warriors dressed in red dresses, wearing sashes, stormed the venue and started shrieking like fishwives. 'Twas pure fish whiffery, I tell you. Screaming at everybody and screaming at Philip Hammond. Right? A Tory minister called Mark Field, a Conservative Party MP called Mark Field, jumped up as one of them passed him and manhandled her and spun her around and frog marched her towards security. And there have been calls now for this guy to resign as an MP. He has since said that he has referred himself he's referred himself to the parliamentary standards people. He didn't grab her by the boobs. He didn't slap her. Thank God he didn't. And pretty much just turned her around and pushed her towards security. Forcibly. Climate change protester. There is more on this. And there is a video of it happening. The video shows him jumping up. All happened very quickly. Grabbing her, spinning her around and saying, "On your bike, love. On you go." These climate change religious zealots. There you are. Emboldened, I suppose, by Greta Thunberg and Extinction Rebellion, think that they can do whatever they want. They can rush into people's places of work, screaming at them. They can rush into restaurants where people are eating meat, having a bit of steak, and scream at them. And they think they can do that without any consequences. Come here, love. Now, I don't have any time for Philip Hammond or the dignitaries or any of these people sitting down to have their meal at the Mansion House last night. But when you aggressively and forcefully barge into a private event, start roaring and bawling and screaming at people, don't start crying when security grab you and put you in a headlock, put your arm up behind your back and drag you from the building. Don't cry about that. And if a little bit of a boob gets squeezed or a little bit of a backside gets felt up inadvertently in the process, don't cry about it. Do you know what made me laugh? I couldn't believe I was finding agreement with Philip Hammond. When Hammond eventually began his address to the Mansion House, the first thing he said was, ironically, he said, this government has just committed to making the UK carbon neutral by 2050, meaning that by 2050 there will be basically zero carbon emissions. So what did they want, said Hammond. They got what they wanted, right? Diesel cars and petrol cars off the road in the next few years, people being told what they can eat, people being told they can't travel. All of this is coming. What did they want, says Hammond. And I had to admit, I looked at the future Mrs. Allen and I went, he's right. Of course, that's lunacy anyway, that policy, isn't it? We know this, you and me. So Field has referred himself to the Chief Whip, to the Parliamentary Standards Committee. He's referred himself to everybody who listened. When all he did really was stand up. She was rushing past him. He was seated near the front. He says, I didn't know what was going on, stood up, grabbed her, turned around, get out on your bike. And now they're calling for his resignation. No, let's not have him resign for doing the right thing. Take your hysteria and your silly climate change nonsense and fuck off. Are you a hypocrite, Richie? If they were coming in screaming about Yemen, would it be okay? You've got me there. But I've never. I'm a basket case of contradictions myself. All right. 'Twould be nice, wouldn't it, if they gave a shit about what's going on in Yemen? I mean, yesterday the High Court said, yes, maybe the government has a case to answer. Maybe the government is committing war crimes by continuing to license arms to Saudi Arabia when those arms are being used to blow little children into millions of pieces. And the government, knowing that, continues to sell those weapons. So yeah, it would have been nice if the fishwives had run into the Mansion House yesterday, because Philip Hammond is implicated, by the way, in the selling of these weapons, to have a go at him. But no, they wanted to talk about climate change, which isn't even happening. It's not happening. It's not happening. I'll read a few more comments before we do the last story. What time is it now? It's 10 o'clock. 10 bells. This is the crappiest of the crap, this, isn't it? Production values. Dinosaur-esque production values here. Where are we going? Philip Blair says, Yemen, yes, that's right. Data Footprint says, will you be covering the Church of England's new investment plans? Medical marijuana? Or will it just be the tough knobs, keeping us in a constant state of confusion? Is it a type of art? Says Data Footprint. Thanks for your comments there. Shan Riha says it will all fall apart for them, climate-wise, because it's actually getting colder. Mega Tree Rat says they were guests actually attending, Richie. Then they stood up, making themselves known. They didn't barge in, says Mega Tree Rat. I could be wrong. I could be wrong too, mate. I could have gotten that wrong. I understood that they barged in, but it actually makes sense, your suggestion that they had tickets. Samantha Jordan says, if anyone grabbed me like that, they would have gotten a right hook. Good stuff. Good stuff. Samantha. Lardosian or Lardosian says, Richie, did you see a Catholic school in Wicklow will next year allow boys wear skirts as part of their uniform? Yeah, I talked about it yesterday. Greystones, yeah. The teacher said the students took it upon themselves to canvass their fellow students to see, shall we go gender neutral? And the students came back as they would and said, yeah, it's a good idea that, yeah. So now if they want to wear skirts, they can. And there will be the male, female gender signs on the bathroom doors will be removed next year. What kind of fuckery are you? Yeah, it's brilliant. It's why I brought up the Debs thing earlier on. Well, John brought up the Debs thing, John in Salford, whose young lad's going to the Debs tonight, going to the prom tonight, of course. We would have said Debs in England as well. This is the Americanization of our language. We shouldn't say prom. We should say Debs. Right, here's one for you. A very fit grandmother. Ding dong. An 81-year-old gran in Stockport, which is only around the corner, has been given an ASBO for wearing a bikini in her garden, in her own garden. And the Daily Mail is looking into this story because it's part of a wider story that town hall bosses are giving out ASBOs. An ASBO is an anti-social behaviour order. So if you're guilty of anything that has been deemed to be antisocial behaviour, you're given an ASBO. It's an order. An ASBO. This woman is Kay Crane. Kay used to be a model. She looks very well, Kay, for 81. And the ASBO ordered was not to play music reasonably loud or to watch or shout at children. What's this all about? I had this story a minute ago. It's brilliant. You can have dead air on a YouTube live stream. I can just be quiet for a couple of minutes while I think. Because I had the actual text of the story, but I don't know what I did with it. I told you, it's crap, this. Anyway. She gets an ASBO for wearing a bikini. That's right. Right. Let's bring in the... Here you are. Yeah. We had a heat wave last summer. So I suppose many people were wearing bikinis in their back gardens. It's nice to have a back garden, if you have a back garden. I've got a nice big front garden. And I have a smaller back garden. But it's nice. There's currently AstroTurf on my front garden. But my local gardener, Andy, is going to take up the AstroTurf. He's going to give the ground a bit of a turn, the sod a bit of a turn with a rotavator. And we're going to put grass down instead of AstroTurf. That was a crime against humanity, wasn't it? Putting AstroTurf down on a nice sized front garden. What a lazy bastard. I'm being a bit unkind now. The previous owner had a child and I think they kicked the football around the AstroTurf. But I'll be getting rid of the AstroTurf. So Kathleen K. Crane was told you're not to wear the bikini in view of the children from a neighbouring nursery, or play music unreasonably loud, or watch or shout at the children. Now this followed a dispute, according to the Daily Mail, involving Miss Crane and her 83-year-old partner about an extension to this said nursery. So it's gotten all very childish. She says she doesn't play the radio in the garden, but she has worn her bikini in her garden. So there's some sort of retaliation going on here. So she was sent an ASBO by the local council, which said, don't wear your bikini in the garden where children could reasonably see it. Don't play music. Basically, shut the hell up. And what's interesting about that, even though, as I said, there's a bit more to that story, is the Mail finding out that councils are sending ASBOs to people at an increasing rate over the last few years. And this is Big Brother, of course, and totalitarianism on steroids. Local authorities sending notices to people telling them, you can't do this, you can't do that. You can't do this in your own home. You can't do that in your garden. You can't do this because it might cause offence to somebody over there. And so on, so on, so on. You see where I'm going with that? Asbo for a gran who wore a bikini in her garden. But as I said, there's a bit more to that story. Right, I'm nearly out of stories, really. Hi to Cliff Moore. How you doing, Cliff? And that's it for the comments. Right, I'm going to love you and leave you then this morning. That's the papers, really. As I said, it's very Trump and Iran-centric this morning. It's very much focusing in, the newspaper is very much focusing in today on the Conservative Party leadership, which is all going to end very soon, please God, because it's absolutely boring the arse off of me and you as well. And there's quite a lot of talk about the Conservative Party MP Mark Field, who ejected a climate change protester from the Mansion House yesterday. Have a brilliant weekend and join me on the radio on Sunday morning at 11 a.m. UK time on richieallen.co.uk and the usual channels. Alrighty? Until then, it's bye from me. Have a fantastic weekend. Look after yourselves and one another.